when reclusive Vera Blackwood rescues 3 worthless goats for $75 at a mountain auction. She expects nothing but companionship. Instead, she discovers they produce the world's finest cashmere, worth millions. A corporate giant offers her $2 million, but the deal requires surrendering the animals who saved her from despair. Caught between life-changing wealth and devastating compromise, Vera must choose: accept easy money that destroys what she values, or risk everything to build an ethical alternative that could transform her dying community, while powerful forces work to ensure she fails. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The frost came early to the Appalachian Mountains that October, creeping across Vera Blackwood's cracked window panes like skeletal fingers. She woke to the sound of silence, the particular kind that only exists in true isolation, where even the wind seems reluctant to disturb your solitude. At 52, Vera had grown accustomed to this silence, though accustomed wasn't quite the same as accepting. Her morning routine was a study in careful economy. She dressed in layers, flannel over thermal, her mother's old cardigan over that, because heating oil cost money she didn't have. The farmhouse her mother had left her 3 years ago was slowly surrendering to gravity and time, its Victorian bones showing through peeling paint and sagging floorboards. Vera moved through it like a ghost haunting her own life. The kitchen was worst in morning light. Every surface seemed to catalogue her failures. The stack of unopened bills she'd wedged behind the sugar canister. The calendar still turned to August, because what did it matter anymore? The single coffee mug she used day after day, because washing too felt like admitting she was alone. The phone began ringing at 8:47. She didn't need to check to know it was another debt collector. Medical bills from her mother's final year. They never stopped coming, like her grief, compounding interest on both. She let it ring. Outside, her garden was a study in stubborn survival. The tomatoes had given up weeks ago, but the kale persisted, tough and bitter. Vera knelt in the cold dirt and harvested enough for soup, her knees protesting. 52 shouldn't feel this old, she thought. But then, 20 years of caring for a dying woman, of watching your education slip away semester by semester, of losing the man who'd promised forever but couldn't handle for worse, that aged you in ways time couldn't measure. She was washing the kale when she found the photograph. It had been wedged behind the kitchen faucet, water-stained but still recognizable. Her mother, maybe 60, standing with that straight-backed Appalachian pride that poverty couldn't quite break. Beside her, a younger Vera in scrubs, fresh from her veterinary program at State, before she'd withdrawn. Before temporary became permanent, the memory arrived unwanted, her ex-fiancé David's voice tight with frustration. "I can't do this anymore, Vera. I can't watch you disappear into these mountains. Your mother has hospice. You don't have to sacrifice everything," but he'd been wrong. She did have to, and when her mother finally slipped away on a February morning, the quiet in the house had been so absolute, Vera thought she might dissolve into it. David was married now. She'd seen it on Facebook during a moment of weakness. 2 kids, a practice in Charlotte. Everything she might have had. Vera put the photograph face down and focused on breathing. The livestock auction wasn't something she attended regularly, once a year at most, usually just to feel less alone for an afternoon. Even if the company consisted of farmers who'd known her since childhood and now looked through her like she was already gone. But she needed fencing supplies she couldn't afford new, and sometimes the auction lot sold remnants cheap. The auction yard smelled like manure and diesel, rang with the voices of men conducting business. Vera kept to the edges, invisible in her mother's old Carhartt jacket. She recognized most of the faces. Jonas Pritchard, 3rd-generation dairy farmer with that particular brand of mountain pride that looked like contempt. Earl Mason, who dated her mother once, 100 years ago. The Hendricks brothers, who ran cattle on the far. Ridge, none of them acknowledged her. She was examining. A pile of T-posts when the laughter started, that particular, cruel kind that signals someone's about to be the butt of a joke. Lot. 47, the auctioneer called. 3 mixed-breed does. Seller says they're cashmere cross, but I'll be honest with you folks, I've seen healthier-looking roadkill. The laughter intensified. Vera looked up. 3 goats huddled in a livestock pen, and they were in terrible shape. Ribs showing, coats patchy and dull, eyes that held the kind of defeat Vera recognized from her own mirror. But it was their oddness that drew the mockery. Unusual proportions, ears set at strange angles, coloring that didn't match any breed standard. They looked like someone's failed experiment. Genetic mistakes, Jonas Pritchard announced to no one in particular. Research facility went belly up, dumped their failures on the market. Worthless animals? Starting bid $50, the auctioneer said without enthusiasm. Silence. Men shifted their weight, looked away. The goats might as well have been already dead for all the interest they generated. Vera should have walked away. She had exactly $140 in her checking account and bills totaling 10 times that. She had no business taking on 3 more mouths to feed. 3 more responsibilities she'd inevitably fail. But the smallest goat, young, she could tell despite the poor condition, lifted its head and looked directly at her. The eye contact lasted maybe 3 seconds, but in it, Vera saw every ounce of her own discarded self. Society's refuse, the ones deemed not worth the effort. 50, Vera heard herself say. Heads turned. Jonas Pritchard's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. 60, she said louder, though no one had counterbid. Ma'am, I haven't, the auctioneer started. 75. Final offer. The auctioneer looked around the yard for any other takers, found none, and shrugged. Sold to the lady for $75. Lot 48? Vera's hands shook as she filled out the paperwork. Behind her she heard Jonas's voice. Woman's finally lost it completely. Throwing away money on dead goats walking. She paid in cash, 320s a 10, and a 5 that left her with $65 until her disability check arrived next week. The auction worker helped her load the goats into the back of her ancient F-150, handling them with the careful indifference of someone doing their job and nothing more. The drive home took 40 minutes on winding mountain roads. In the rearview mirror, Vera could see the goats huddled together, terrified. The smallest one, she'd call her Thistle, she decided, was shaking despite the afternoon warmth. The medium one, skittish and scarred, would be Bramble. And the largest, with that almost maternal way of positioning herself between the others and the truck's cab, was clearly Clover. What the hell did I just do? Vera asked the empty cab. No answer came, but when she glanced back again, Clover was watching her with an expression that might have been hope. At the farmhouse, Vera coaxed the goats into her barn, a generous term for the leaning structure her grandfather had built 60 years ago. She spread fresh straw she couldn't afford, filled buckets with water, and stood watching them explore their new home with tentative steps. They were a mess. Malnourished, probably sick, definitely traumatized. Saving them would take money, time, knowledge she hadn't used in 20 years. It was reckless and foolish, and everything she'd been accused of being when she'd left veterinary school. But as Thistle approached the water bucket and drank with desperate gulps, as Bramble found a corner and finally stopped shaking, as Clover positioned herself at the barn entrance like a sentry guarding her small family, Vera felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Purpose. It was fragile and probably temporary, and it certainly didn't solve any of her actual problems. But standing in the barn as autumn light slanted through gaps in the walls, watching 3 discarded creatures begin to trust they might be safe, Vera Blackwood felt the first ember of something that might someday become hope. Tomorrow she'd worry about feed costs and veterinary supplies and all the practical impossibilities. Tonight, she'd just sit with these 3 unlikely companions and remember what it felt like to be needed. She didn't know it yet, but in saving them, she'd just taken the first step towards saving herself. Over the following weeks, Vera fell into a rhythm she'd forgotten existed, one dictated not by isolation and avoidance, but by the needs of 3 living creatures who depended on her completely. The first few days were crisis management. She spent money she didn't have at the farm supply store, enduring the clerk's raised eyebrows when she bought dewormer, electrolytes, and mineral supplements. She cleaned the barn properly for the first time in years, her back screaming protests she ignored, and she watched the goats constantly, cataloguing symptoms with the veterinary knowledge she'd thought she'd lost to time and grief. Clover was the easiest to assess. Maternal instinct made her cautiously trusting. She'd approach Vera's hand, sniff carefully, then allow a gentle touch. Beneath the patchy coat, Vera could feel every rib but also solid bone structure. Good genetics under the neglect. Bramble was another story entirely. The middle goat skittered away from any approach, eyes rolling white with panic. Vera noticed scars on her legs, old. Rope burns maybe, or wire. Someone had tied this animal badly, probably often. Patience would be required here, the kind Vera had spent on her mother during the worst days, when pain made her lash out at the person trying to help, and Thistle, playful Thistle, even half-starved, brought the first smile to Vera's face in longer than she could remember. The young goat had curiosity that malnutrition couldn't quite kill. She'd nose into Vera's pockets, nibble at her jacket zipper, bleat softly as if asking questions Vera couldn't quite answer. "Your trouble," Vera told her on day 3, scratching behind ears that were set at an odd angle, too large, too expressive. "I can already tell," Thistle responded by trying to eat her shoelace. The research began late at night, when the house was quiet and the goats were settled in the barn. Vera pulled out the old laptop she barely used, its fan whirring protests, and started searching. Goat nutrition, cashmere breeds, genetic variations. She fell down rabbit holes of information, her long-dormant student brain waking up and demanding more. She discovered that most cashmere goats were descended from a few key bloodlines. That fiber quality varied wildly based on genetics, nutrition, and care. That the luxury market paid extraordinary prices for the finest micron counts, whatever those were. None of it seemed relevant to her 3 rescues. They were mutts, mistakes, the kind of animals that fell through the cracks of proper breeding programs. Still, she read on. By week 2, the transformation was visible. Proper feed, clean water, dewormer, and basic medical care worked small miracles. Clover's coat began to shine. Bramble stopped flinching quite so violently. Thistle's playfulness exploded into full-blown mischief. She'd escaped the barn twice already, once ending up on Vera's porch, bleating indignantly at the door. "You're not a dog," Vera informed her, carrying the squirming goat back to the barn. "You don't get to come inside," but the loneliness that had defined her existence felt less absolute, with 3 pairs of eyes watching for her arrival each morning. The veterinarian's visit came unannounced on a Thursday afternoon. Vera was in the barn, brushing Clover's improving coat, when she heard the truck engine. Her stomach clenched. Visitors meant questions, judgment, interaction with the world that had written her off. Dr. Estelle Kim climbed out of a white pickup with a veterinary practice logo on the door. She was in her early 60s, Korean-American, with the no-nonsense bearing of someone who'd spent 30 years dealing with stubborn farmers and stubborner animals. "Vera Blackwood," Estelle said, approaching the barn. "Heard you bought some goats at auction. Thought I'd check in. I didn't call you." Vera's defensiveness rose automatically. "No, you didn't." Estelle stepped into the barn, assessed the space with a professional eye. "Your mother always called me, though, for everything." Good woman, Eleanor Blackwood, practical. Unlike her daughter, apparently. The words could have been cruel, but Estelle's tone held something else. Concern, maybe, or respect for someone making foolish choices for good reasons. She'd known Eleanor through the dying. "After all, I can't afford a vet visit," Vera said flatly. "Good thing I'm not billing you." Then Estelle approached Clover, who watched her with alert calm. "May I?" Vera nodded, stepping back. Estelle's examination was thorough and professional. She checked teeth, eyes, coat condition, felt for lumps or abnormalities. She examined Bramble next, moving slowly, earning trust, then Thistle, who tried to eat Estelle's stethoscope. You've done good work here, Estelle said, finally straightening. 2 weeks ago, these animals were hours from dead. Now they're on the mend. That dormant vet school training kicked in, I see. Vera said nothing, unsure how to accept the compliment. Their coats are unusual, Estelle continued, running her hand along Clover's side. Texture's different than standard cashmere. Probably just poor nutrition affecting fiber development, but it's soft. Very soft, actually. Is that significant? Estelle shrugged. Could be. Could be nothing. Cashmere quality varies. But I've felt a lot of goat fiber in my career, and this is, she paused, searching for words, exceptional. For animals in this condition anyway. After Estelle left, with a promise to check in again, which Vera knew meant the vet was keeping tabs on her, Vera returned to the barn. She ran her hand along Clover's side, feeling what Estelle had noticed. The fiber was growing in thick now, healthy diet showing results, and it was soft. Impossibly soft, like something between silk and cloud. She'd groomed sheep before, years ago, during her practicum. She knew wool, knew mohair, knew standard cashmere from the few goats she'd encountered. This was different, finer, more lustrous. Probably nothing, like Estelle said. Just good genetics recovering from bad care. But Vera began collecting the shed fiber anyway. She'd brush the goats each evening, gathering loose undercoat in a basket. It accumulated quickly. Handfuls of downy softness that seemed to glow in the barn's dim light. She told herself it was just curiosity, something to focus on besides bills and loneliness and the slow decay of her mother's house. But late at night, running the fiber through her fingers, Vera felt something she hadn't felt in 20 years, the thrill of discovery. The sense that maybe, possibly, she'd stumbled onto something unusual. 3 weeks after the auction, she finally groomed Bramble successfully. The skittish goat stood still, trembling but trusting, as Vera worked through her coat with gentle strokes. The fiber that came away was extraordinary, even finer than Clover's, nearly translucent in the light. "What are you?" Vera whispered to the goat. "What did they make you?" Bramble had no answers, but she pressed her head against Vera's chest briefly before skittering away, the closest thing to affection the traumatized animal had shown. That night, Vera sat at her kitchen table with a pile of collected fiber. On impulse, she pulled out her laptop and began searching again. Not for goat care this time, but for fiber testing, university programs, research facilities, ways to analyze what she'd found without spending money she didn't have. The University of Virginia had a textile science program. Their website mentioned a fiber analysis service, free for agricultural producers in-state, designed to help farmers understand their product quality. Vera stared at the application form for 20 minutes, doubt paralyzing her. This was foolish. She'd send in samples, they'd confirm it was standard cashmere from mongrel goats, and she'd feel stupid for hoping. But hope was a dangerous thing, wasn't it? Once you let it in, it could make you do reckless things. Like spending your last $75 on dying animals. Like believing discarded things might have value. Vera filled out the form. She packaged fiber samples from all 3 goats, carefully labeled, professionally presented despite her shaking hands. She drove to town the next morning and shipped them priority mail, spending $18 she couldn't afford. Then she went home and tried not to think about it. The goats didn't care about fiber quality or university programs or Vera's fragile, foolish hope. They cared about feed schedules and fresh water and the routine that made them feel safe. So Vera focused on that, on the simple, honest work of caring for creatures who'd been abandoned by the world, like her mother, like everything the mountains discarded when it was no longer convenient. 2 weeks later, on a frost-bright November morning, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Vera almost didn't answer. Creditors and scammers, that's what unknown numbers meant. But something made her pick up. "Is this Vera Blackwood?" A man's voice asked, breathless with excitement. "The one who sent fiber samples to our lab?" Vera's heart began to pound. "This is Dr. Marcus Tang from UVA Textile Sciences. Ms. Blackwood, I need to ask you, where did you get this fiber?" "Because what you sent us, it shouldn't exist outside a controlled laboratory environment," Vera's kitchen suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in as Marcus Tang's voice filled the space with impossible words. "I don't understand," she managed, gripping the phone. "They're just goats. Rescue animals from an auction, just goats?" Marcus laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was the sound of someone encountering something that broke their understanding of the world. "Miss Blackwood, the samples you sent tested at 12 to 14 microns. Do you know what that means?" "No. Standard cashmere ranges from 15 to 19 microns. Premium cashmere, the kind that sells for hundreds of dollars per pound, is under 16. Vicuña, the finest natural fiber in the world, averages 13 to 14. Your samples are competing with vicuña, and vicuña can't be domestically farmed. It only exists wild in the Andes." Vera sat down hard in her mother's old kitchen chair. Through the window, she could see the barn where 3 goats were probably trying to escape, eat something toxic or both. That can't be right. They were sold as worthless. Genetic failures. Failures. Marcus's laugh bordered on hysterical. "Miss Blackwood, I've been studying textile fibers for 15 years. I spent 7 years in corporate research trying to breed goats that could produce fiber like this. We failed. Everyone's failed. And you're telling me you have 3 animals producing it naturally? I mean, they were from some research facility that went bankrupt." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Which facility? When? I need to know the breeding history, the genetic lineage. Can I come see them? I'm sorry, I know this is overwhelming, but I need to verify this isn't a testing error. Can I visit your farm? Vera's instinct was to say no, to protect her space, her goats, her fragile new routine from intrusion. But Marcus's excitement was infectious, and more than that, he sounded genuine. Not like someone trying to take advantage, but like a scientist confronting a miracle. "When?" she heard herself ask. "Is tomorrow too soon?" "I can drive down from Charlottesville in the morning. I'll bring portable testing equipment. Miss Blackwood, if this is real, and I think it is, you're sitting on something extraordinary." After they hung up, Vera sat in her kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing. Extraordinary. The word felt foreign, impossible. Nothing in her life had been extraordinary, except in its capacity for loss. She walked out to the barn, where Clover greeted her with a gentle headbutt. Bramble watched from a careful distance, and Thistle immediately began investigating her pockets for treats. "What are you?" Vera asked them again. "What did someone make you?" The goats, characteristically, offered no answers. That afternoon, Zeke Holloway appeared at her door like he always did, unannounced, unexpected, carrying a jar of honey from his bees. He was in his 70s, weathered and lean, with wild white hair and eyes that seemed to see through surfaces to the truth beneath. "Zeke," Vera said, surprised but not unwelcoming. He'd been her mother's friend, the kind who showed up during the worst days with honey and herbs and stories that made dying feel less like an ending. "Heard you got yourself some animals," he said, following her to the barn without invitation. "Wanted to see what had you spending money you don't have. News travels fast. Mountain always knows its own business." He stepped into the barn, and the goats regarded him with unusual calm. Even Bramble didn't skitter away. Interesting creatures. Zeke moved among them with the slow confidence of someone who understood animals. He examined them not with a vet's clinical eye, but with something older. Intuition, maybe, or just decades of watching how living things moved through the world. "You know the story of the mountain ash?" he asked finally, running his hand along Clover's spine. "Is this going to be one of your parables? You got somewhere better to be?" Vera smiled despite herself. "No, Zeke, tell me about the mountain ash. Grows where nothing else will. Terrible soil, barely any water, wind that could strip bark from oak. And yet it produces berries so sweet, birds will fly 100 miles for them. Folks used to think it was cursed, growing where it shouldn't. But the old healers knew better. Sometimes the harshest conditions produce the finest medicine." He looked at her directly. and Vera felt seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and necessary. These animals were grown in harsh conditions, Zeke continued. Cast aside, called worthless. But maybe that's because folks were looking for the wrong kind of value. Maybe they were measuring with the wrong tools. A scientist is coming tomorrow, Vera said quietly. He says their fiber is extraordinary. Does that surprise you? Yes, no, I don't know. She leaned against the barn wall, suddenly exhausted. Everything worthwhile in my life has been taken away or fallen apart. I don't know how to believe in something good happening. Zeke was quiet for a moment, watching Thistle investigate his bootlaces. Your mama used to say the same thing near the end. Said she'd used up all her good fortune just surviving this long. But then you came back from school, gave up everything to care for her. She called that good fortune, not for her maybe, but for you. Said it taught you what mattered. It taught me that sacrifice gets you nothing but debt and loneliness. Did it? Zeke scratched Thistle's head, and the goat leaned into his hand with shameless pleasure. Or did it teach you how to see the value in things other people throw away? He left shortly after, taking nothing but giving Vera something to think about. She spent the evening preparing the barn for Marcus's visit, cleaning compulsively, organizing feed, brushing the goats until they gleamed. Anything to avoid thinking about what tomorrow might bring. But that night, lying in her mother's old bed in her mother's old house, Vera let herself imagine, just for a moment, what if Marcus was right? What if these 3 abandoned goats really were extraordinary? What if the things she'd saved out of compassion could somehow save her in return? The hope was terrifying. She'd learned not to hope, learned that hope was just a prelude to disappointment. But the goats had already changed something in her, had given her routine, purpose, a reason to get up beyond simple survival. Maybe they had more to give, or maybe tomorrow Marcus would arrive, discover a testing error, and confirm that Vera was still exactly what she'd always been, someone who made foolish choices that led nowhere. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, Vera dreamed of fiber so fine it was invisible, of goats with wings, of her mother telling her that sometimes the worthless things are worth everything. She woke to her phone ringing. Ms. Blackwood? Marcus Tang's voice, even more excited than yesterday. I'm leaving Charlottesville now. I couldn't sleep. I ran the tests 3 more times. The results are consistent. I need to see these animals. I'll be there by 9. Vera looked at her clock. 6:47 a.m. I'll put coffee on, she said. She rose, dressed, and walked out to the barn in the pre-dawn darkness. The goats were still sleeping, 3 shapes huddled together for warmth. Clover lifted her head as Vera approached, then settled back down, trusting. Whatever happens today, Vera whispered to them, you're still mine. You're still safe here. Nothing changes that, but she knew even as she said it, that everything was about to change. Marcus Tang arrived at 8:53 a.m. in a Prius, so out of place on Vera's mountain road it might as well have been a spaceship. He emerged wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, completely unsuited to farm work, carrying 2 cases of equipment and radiating nervous energy. Ms. Blackwood. He called, spotting her on the porch. Vera, she corrected, descending the steps. Up close, Marcus was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s, Asian-American, with messy hair and eyes that darted everywhere, cataloguing details. Handsome in an awkward, unaware way. Marcus, obviously, we talked on the phone, so you know that, but... He stopped, took a breath. Sorry, I'm not great with people. Much better with fibers. Despite herself, Vera smiled. The barn's this way. She watched Marcus transform as they approached the goats. The nervous energy focused into something precise and professional. He set down his equipment carefully, then approached Clover with his hands visible, moving slowly. May I? He asked Vera. She's gentle. The other 2 are more skittish. Marcus ran his hands along Clover's side, his fingers working through the fiber with practiced expertise. His expression shifted from professional interest to wonder, to something approaching disbelief. Oh my God, he breathed. It's real. He pulled a small device from his case, some kind of handheld microscope, and took samples, examining them with an intensity that made Vera feel invisible. She didn't mind. There was something pure about watching someone encounter their life's work, made manifest. 12.3 microns, Marcus said, checking his device. Staple length is excellent. Crimp is perfect. Luster is... He looked up at Vera and she saw tears in his eyes. Do you understand what you have here? Not really, no. Standard cashmere sells for $30 to $50 a pound. Premium cashmere under 16 microns can fetch $100 to $200. Vicuña sells for $300 to $600 per pound, but it's illegal to farm. You can only harvest wild animals in Peru under strict regulation. He gestured at clover. This fiber could compete with vicuña, and you can farm it, sustainably, ethically. Do you understand what that means in the luxury market? Vera's head spun. That's thousands of dollars per animal? Potentially, yes. Depending on yield, processing, market connections, Marcus moved to Bramble, who watched him with wary eyes. May I try with this one? Be patient. She's been hurt before. Marcus spent 10 minutes earning Bramble's trust, sitting nearby, talking softly, offering his hand for inspection. Vera found herself warming to him, someone who understood that trust couldn't be rushed. When Bramble finally allowed him to touch her, Marcus's examination was even more gentle than with Clover. He collected samples, tested them, and his hands trembled slightly as he read the results. 11.9, he whispered. She's producing the finest natural fiber I've ever personally encountered. Thistle, characteristically, had no patience for professional boundaries. She bounded over, tried to eat Marcus's equipment, and demanded attention with shameless bleating. This one's trouble, Vera warned. This one's amazing. Marcus laughed as Thistle nibbled his sleeve. 13.2 microns, but she's young. As she matures, if the genetic trend holds... He stopped himself. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me explain what I think happened here. They moved to Vera's porch, where she'd set out coffee neither of them had touched. Marcus pulled out a laptop and began showing her images, microscopic views of fiber structures, genetic charts, breeding program data. There have been attempts for decades to breed ultra-fine cashmere goats, he explained. Corporate programs, university research, international collaborations. The genetics are incredibly complex. We can get fine fiber, but usually with poor yield, or high yield with coarser fiber. Getting both, fine fiber with good staple length and adequate production, has been the holy grail of textile breeding. And these goats have it? Based on these samples and preliminary examination, yes, they shouldn't exist. Which means someone, somewhere, succeeded in creating what the entire industry has been chasing. Then went bankrupt and sold them as failures. Why would they do that? Marcus ran his hand through his hair, making it even messier. Maybe they didn't realize what they had. Maybe they were measuring success differently, looking for commercial-scale yield, missed the fiber quality. Maybe they were shut down before they could properly analyze their results. Research facilities go under all the time. Assets get liquidated. Records get lost. He pulled up another screen. Corporate documents, news articles. I spent 5 years at Lux Fiber International, working on exactly this kind of breeding program. The conditions were, he paused, choosing words carefully, problematic. Animals treated as production units, not living beings. When I objected to the welfare standards, I was told to focus on results, not ethics. I quit. Is that why you're helping me? I'm helping you because this is the most important fiber discovery in decades, and it happened naturally, to someone who cares about the animals producing it. He looked at her directly. Also because the alternative is watching corporate interests acquire these goats and treat them the way I watched animals treated at Lux Fiber. And I won't let that happen again if I can prevent it. Vera found herself trusting him. This awkward scientist who got emotional about fiber microns and animal welfare. What happens now? She asked. That's up to you. You have options. Marcus pulled out a notepad, began sketching scenarios. Small-scale, artisan sales to hand spinners and weavers. You'd need to learn processing, build an online presence, but you could start generating income immediately. Moderate scale, establish relationships with ethical luxury brands, sell processed fiber at premium prices. Or large-scale, breeding program, expanding production, potentially creating a new genetics line. And the risks? Small-scale is safest, but limited income. Large-scale brings corporate attention and corporate predators. People will want what you have. Some will offer partnerships. Others will try to take it. His expression darkened. Oh, trust me. I've seen how this industry operates. They talked for hours. Marcus explained micron counts, staple length, crimp definition, terms that would have overwhelmed Vera a week ago, but now felt urgent, necessary. He showed her online communities of fiber artists, explained processing methods, discussed marketing strategies. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Around noon, a truck rumbled past on the road, Jonas Pritchard's distinctive Ford. It slowed as Jonas spotted Marcus's Prius in the driveway, his face visible through the window. Suspicious, calculating. Local farmer, Vera explained as the truck continued on. He was at the auction. Mock the goats. Word will spread, Marcus warned. Small communities talk. And once people know these goats are valuable, everything changes. Everything changes, he confirmed. Before Marcus left that afternoon, promising to send detailed information about fiber processing and market connections, he stood by his car. Awkward again now that the professional conversation had ended. I know this is overwhelming, he said. You went from rescuing 3 dying goats to potentially sitting on a fortune in 3 weeks. That's a lot to process. It doesn't feel real, Vera admitted. It is real. And Vera, he hesitated. Be careful who you trust. This industry attracts opportunists. If anyone approaches you with offers, contracts, partnerships, call me first, please. I've seen good people get exploited by promises of wealth. Why do you care? You don't know me? Marcus looked back at the barn, where 3 goats were visible through the open door, safe and healthy and completely unaware of their own value. Because someone should have cared about the animals I worked with at Lux Fiber, he said quietly. Someone should have protected them. Maybe if I help you protect these 3, it balances the scales a little. After he left, Vera sat on her porch as afternoon faded to evening, watching the mountains go purple with shadow. Inside the barn, her 3 extraordinary goats were settling in for the night, expecting nothing more than food, water, and safety. She'd given them that. And somehow, impossibly, they were giving her back a future she'd thought was gone forever. But Marcus's warning echoed in her mind. Be careful who you trust. The mountains had always known their own business, and by tomorrow everyone would know that Vera Blackwood's worthless goats weren't worthless at all. The feed store smelled like grain dust and gossip, and Jonas Pritchard was holding court near the register. I'm telling you, Earl, I saw it myself. Some city fellow in a Prius, up at the Blackwood place for hours. Heard he's from the university. Testing those goats she bought. Vera heard this standing in the supplements aisle, invisible as always. But Earl Mason's response carried clearly. What would a university want with genetic failures? That's what I'd like to know. Woman's always been strange, but she's up to something. Vera grabbed her mineral blocks and dewormer, paid quickly, and left without acknowledging either man. But the damage was done. The mountains were talking. Over the next week, the change was subtle but unmistakable. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to her in years suddenly found reasons to drive past her property. Helen Gardner from the church stopped by with a casserole and transparent curiosity about those special goats you're raising. Even the mail carrier lingered longer, making small talk, fishing for information. Vera recognized opportunism when she saw it. These same people had watched her struggle for 3 years without offering help. Now that she might have something valuable, their sudden friendship felt like an insult, but not everyone's interest was predatory. Estelle Kim returned for a follow-up visit, this time billing Vera properly, but at a community rate that was obviously reduced. Word is you've got something special, Estelle said, examining Thistle. Jonas says university people are interested. Marcus Tang. He's a textile scientist. And what did this Marcus Tang say? Vera hesitated, then decided Estelle had earned honesty. That their fiber is exceptionally rare, potentially very valuable. Estelle was quiet for a moment, her hand still working through Thistle's coat. That's good. You deserve good fortune, Vera. Your mother would be pleased. The kindness stung more than the opportunism had. Vera found her throat tight. People will come, Estelle continued, her tone careful. With offers, promises, contracts. The mountain economy is dying. Desperation makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise consider. Be smart about who you trust. That's what Marcus said. Then Marcus is wise. Estelle stood, brushed hay from her pants. My advice, go slow. Don't let anyone rush you into decisions. And remember, you don't owe anyone anything just because they're friendly now. Meanwhile, Marcus had been true to his word. Detailed emails arrived daily. Processing techniques, market analysis, contacts in the ethical fiber community. He introduced Vera to online forums where hand spinners and weavers gathered, helped her photograph her fiber samples, coached her through listing her first sales. The response was overwhelming. Vera's listing for 4 ounces of processed cashmere fiber she'd combed from Glover and prepared following Marcus's instructions, sold in 6 hours for $120, more than she typically made in a week. The buyer, a weaver in Oregon, left an ecstatic review. Softest fiber I've ever worked with. Like spinning clouds. We'll buy everything you produce. Within days, Vera had orders worth over $800. It felt like monopoly money. Impossible. Unreal. She paid off an overdue electric bill and sat staring at her bank balance, watching it climb above zero for the first time in months. The relief was physical. She could breathe without the constant weight of financial terror, but the guilt came too. She'd struggled for 3 years, survived on nothing, sacrificed everything. Now 3 goats were generating more income in a week than she'd scraped together in months. The disparity felt obscene. The ease of it felt unearned. You saved them, Marcus reminded her during one of their now regular phone calls. You invested money you didn't have, time you barely had, knowledge you thought was useless. This isn't luck, Vera. This is the result of your choices. It feels like luck. Then enjoy it. God knows you've earned some good fortune, she tried. She bought groceries without calculating every dollar. She got the truck's oil changed. She replaced the barn's worst boards. Small, practical things that made life marginally less difficult, but every purchase felt precarious, like she was spending money that belonged to someone else. The phone call came on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after Marcus's visit. Unknown number. Vera almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Vera. It's Roy. Her brother's voice, charming, warm, familiar, hit like a physical blow. She hadn't spoken to Roy in 4 years. Not since their mother's funeral, when he'd shown up late, left early, and asked to borrow money Vera didn't have. How did you get this number? Aunt Claire. Look, I know we haven't talked, and I know that's on me, but I heard something through the family grapevine, and I wanted to reach out. Congratulate you. Congratulate me on your goats. Claire said you've got some kind of valuable fiber business starting up. That's amazing. Sis, really, you deserve something good after everything with Mom. The sis felt like manipulation, intimate, presumptuous, designed to create connection that hadn't existed in years. What do you want, Roy? Can't I just call to check on my sister? You haven't checked on me in 4 years. A pause. When Roy spoke again, the charm had a sharp edge. I've been going through some things, Vera, difficult things. I made some bad investments. Got in over my head with the wrong people. I'm in a tight spot. There it was. The real reason for the call. I can't help you, Vera said flatly. I'm not asking for much. Just a small loan to get me clear. Once you start making real money from those goats. Goodbye, Roy. Wait. Vera, please. These people aren't playing around. I need... She hung up, her hands shook. The phone immediately rang again, Roy calling back. She declined the call. He called twice more before finally stopping. Vera sat in her kitchen, staring at her mother's photograph on the wall. Vera Blackwood, who'd raised 2 children alone after their father left, who'd worked herself to exhaustion keeping the farm running, who died drowning in medical debt despite a lifetime of hard work. Roy had abandoned all of it. Run away at 18, leaving Vera to handle everything alone. And now he wanted back in because she might have money. The anger felt clean and righteous, but underneath it, older and more painful, the wound of being the one who stayed, who sacrificed, who got nothing but debt and isolation while Roy got to run free. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. This isn't over. Family takes care of family. Vera blocked the number. She walked out to the barn, where her 3 goats greeted her with their usual enthusiasm. Clover pressed against her legs, Bramble watched from her safe distance, and Thistle immediately began investigating her pockets. "You 3 have caused quite the commotion," Vera told them. "The whole mountain's talking. My estranged brother's calling. Neighbors who ignored me for years are suddenly friendly." Clover made a soft sound, almost sympathetic. "Marcus says people will come with offers. Estelle says to be careful. Everyone's got advice." She sat down in the hay, and Thistle immediately climbed into her lap, far too large for it but undeterred. "But none of them are here at 5 a.m. when you need feeding. None of them cleaned Bramble's infected hoof or sat up with Clover when she was colicky. That was just us." The goats had no response to this, but their presence was answer enough. Whatever happened next, whatever offers came, whatever pressure built, whatever Roy tried, these 3 were hers. She'd saved them and they'd saved her, and that bond wasn't transactional. But as Vera sat in the barn's comfortable silence, she couldn't shake the feeling that the simple, quiet life she'd built over the past month was already ending. The world had noticed, and the world wanted in. Roy arrived unannounced on a Tuesday morning, his rental car looking as out of place as Marcus's Prius had. But where Marcus had brought awkward enthusiasm, Roy brought calculated charm. "Sis." He emerged from the car with arms wide, as if expecting an embrace. Vera stayed on the porch, arms crossed. "You're not welcome here. Come on, don't be like that." Roy's smile stayed fixed, but his eyes were harder than Vera remembered. 4 years had added lines around his mouth, a desperate edge to his charm. "I drove 6 hours to see you. I told you on the phone I can't help you, can't or won't." He climbed the porch steps uninvited. Up close, she could see the tells. The expensive shirt that didn't quite hide weight loss, the watch that screamed desperation to appear successful, the tremor in his hands he tried to mask. "I'm your brother, Vera. Family. Family left when Mom got sick. Family didn't come back until there might be money involved." Roy's mask slipped briefly, showing anger, before resettling into wounded innocence. "That's not fair. I had my own life, my own problems. Not everyone could put everything on hold like you did. Get off my property. Just hear me out." 5 minutes. "Then if you want me gone, I'll go." Against her better judgment, because he was still her little brother. Still the boy she'd helped raise after their father left. Vera nodded. Roy's story came out in a rehearsed rush. Bad investments in cryptocurrency. Loans from business associates who turned out to be loan sharks. Threats against his safety if he didn't pay within the month. He needed $50,000. Just $50,000 and he'd be clear. "I don't have $50,000, Vera said flatly, "but you will. Those goats, Aunt Claire said people are paying hundreds for the fiber. And if you breed them, expand production, I've made less than $1,000 total. I'm still drowning in Mom's medical debt. I have nothing to give you." Roy's face hardened. "So you'd watch your own brother get hurt over money?" "I'd watch you face the consequences of your own choices." "Yes." They stared at each other across a chasm that had been growing since childhood. Vera, who stayed and sacrificed. Roy, who ran and blamed. The sound of an approaching vehicle saved them from whatever came next. A sleek black Mercedes SUV turned into Vera's driveway. As alien to the mountain landscape as a shark in a swimming pool, a woman emerged, mid-40s, immaculately dressed in business casual that probably cost more than Vera's truck, moving with the confidence of someone who owned every room she entered. Behind her, a younger man in a suit carried a leather portfolio, Miss Blackwood. The woman's smile was professional warmth calibrated to put people at ease. I'm Diane Mercer, CEO of Lux Fiber International. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. I was in the area and couldn't resist the opportunity to meet you in person." Vera's stomach dropped. Marcus had warned her about Lux Fiber, his former employer, the company whose practices had driven him to quit. "How did you find me?" "Industry networks are small, Ms. Blackwood. Word of exceptional fiber reaches us quickly. May we talk? I promise it will be worth your time." Roy's face had transformed at the word CEO, naked hope and calculation. "I'm Roy Blackwood, Vera's brother." He extended his hand before Vera could object. "I help manage her business interests." "No, he doesn't," Vera corrected sharply. Diane's smile never wavered, but her eyes noted everything. "Perhaps we could speak inside. What I have to propose is best discussed privately." Every instinct screamed at Vera to refuse. But Diane had already seen the farm. The goats knew where she lived. Refusing the conversation wouldn't make Lux Fiber disappear. "Fine, but he leaves." Vera gestured at Roy. "Vera, leave, Roy." Diane watched this exchange with interest, then turned to Roy with sympathetic warmth. "Family dynamics can be complicated. Here's my card, Mr. Blackwood. Perhaps we could talk later. Compare notes about Miss Blackwood's unique situation." Roy took the card eagerly, shot Vera a triumphant look she didn't understand, and retreated to his rental car. Inside, Diane declined Vera's offer of coffee but accepted water, settling at the kitchen table with the ease of someone comfortable anywhere. Her assistant, introduced simply as David, opened the portfolio and arranged documents with practiced efficiency. "Ms. Blackwood, I'll be direct because I respect your time," Diane began. "Your goats possess genetic traits that represent a significant breakthrough in luxury fiber production. We've verified this through our own industry sources. Lux Fiber International specializes in acquiring and developing exactly these kinds of rare genetics. Marcus Tang told me about Lux Fiber," Vera said. "He used to work for you," Diane's smile tightened fractionally. Marcus. Brilliant scientist, though he never quite understood the business realities of commercial production. "I assume he's been advising you?" "Yes." "Then he's probably painted a rather negative picture of our operations." "Marcus is idealistic, admirable but not always practical. The luxury fiber industry requires scale, efficiency, and yes, sometimes difficult choices to meet market demands." She slid a document across the table. Vera picked it up, seeing numbers that made her head spin. $2 million, Diane said. "Cash payment, transferred within 30 days of contract signing. In exchange, Lux Fiber acquires your 3 goats, their genetic material, and exclusive rights to their breeding line. We'll handle all production, processing, and marketing. You walk away financially secure, free to pursue whatever life you choose. $2 million. Vera stared at the number, tried to comprehend what it meant. No more debt. A new life. Freedom from this decaying farmhouse and the ghosts of sacrifice that haunted it. "The goats would come with me," she managed. "They'd be relocated to our primary breeding facility in Montana. State-of-the-art care, expert veterinarians on staff, optimal conditions for fiber production and genetic development. They'd be extremely well cared for. Marcus said your facilities prioritize production over welfare." Diane's expression remained pleasant, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Marcus left 7 years ago. Our standards have evolved significantly. We're a publicly traded company now, Ms. Blackwood. Reputation matters. Animal welfare matters." She pulled out photos, clean barns, spacious pens, goats that looked healthy and well-tended. "This would be their home. I understand you care about their well-being, so do we. Happy, healthy animals produce better fiber. It's good business." Vera looked at the photos, the contract, the impossible sum of money. She thought about Clover's gentle headbutts, Bramble's hard-won trust, Thistle's shameless affection. 3 animals she'd saved from death, who'd saved her from despair. "I need time to think." Of course. A decision this significant deserves careful consideration. Diane stood, David efficiently gathering the documents. "I'll give you 2 weeks. The offer expires after that. Market conditions change. Opportunities shift. 2 weeks to change your life, Miss Blackwood." At the door, Diane paused. One more thing. Your brother mentioned he's helping manage your business interests? He's not, I see. Well, if you do decide to bring in advisors, legal, financial, whatever you need, Lux Fiber can provide recommendations. We want you to feel supported through this process. After they left, Vera sat alone in her kitchen, staring at the folder of documents Diane had left behind. $2 million. A sum so large it didn't feel real. Roy's rental car was still parked down the road when she looked out the window, waiting, watching. The knock came an hour later. Vera knew it would be him. $2 million, Vera. Roy's eyes were bright with desperation and greed. Do you understand what that means? You could pay off all your debts, give me what I need, and still have over $1 million left. Everyone wins. The goats lose. They're animals. They don't care where they live as long as they're fed. You don't know anything about them, and you're willing to throw away millions over 3 goats? Roy's voice rose. Mom worked herself to death for nothing. You gave up everything for nothing. And now you finally have a chance at real money, at a real life, and you're going to say no because of some sentimental attachment to farm animals. Get out! I'm in serious trouble, Vera. These people, they're not making empty threats. I need that money, and you're the only family I have left. You're not my family, Vera said, the words coming from someplace cold and certain. Family doesn't abandon each other. Family doesn't show up only when there's profit involved. You made your choices, Roy. Live with them. You selfish bitch. The mask was fully off now, showing the desperate, angry man beneath. You always acted so superior, so noble, sacrificing for Mom. But it was just cowardice. You were too scared to have a real life, so you hid up here and called it virtue. And now you're going to let your own brother suffer because you're too attached to some worthless animals. They're not worthless. And neither am I. Roy's laugh was ugly. Keep telling yourself that. But when you're still broke and alone in 5 years, still drowning in debt and bitterness, remember you chose goats over family. Remember, you could have saved us both. He stormed out, engine roaring to life, gravel spraying as he tore down the mountain road. Vera stood alone in her kitchen, shaking. She walked to the barn, where 3 goats greeted her with their usual enthusiasm, completely unaware they'd just been assigned a value of $2 million. Clover pressed against her legs. Bramble watched from a comfortable distance, closer than she used to stand, trust slowly growing. Thistle investigated her pockets, hoping for treats. What do I do? Vera asked them. They had no answers. But their presence, warm and alive and trusting, felt like answer enough. That night, Vera opened Diane's folder and read the contract carefully. The language was dense, legal, designed to obscure as much as reveal. But certain phrases stood out: complete genetic rights, exclusive breeding control, transfer of all animals and biological material. She'd be giving up everything, not just the goats themselves, but any future offspring, any genetic potential. If she wanted to continue fiber production, she'd have to start over with different animals, and the photos Diane had shown, sterile, professional, carefully curated. They showed what Lux Fiber wanted her to see, not necessarily the truth. Vera thought about Marcus, who'd left this company because he couldn't stomach their practices. Marcus, who'd driven down from Charlottesville on a moment's notice because he was excited about fiber quality. Marcus, who'd warned her to be careful. She picked up her phone and called him. Vera, everything okay? Diane Mercer was here today. She offered me $2 million for the goats. Silence. Then, fuck. It was the first time she'd heard Marcus curse. Somehow that made the situation more real. Tell me everything, he said. Don't leave anything out. Vera recounted the visit, Roy's arrival, the contract terms. Marcus listened without interrupting, and she could hear him typing, taking notes probably, or researching. 2 weeks deadline, he said finally. Classic pressure tactic. Make you decide before you've had time to really understand what you're giving up. And the genetic rights clause, Vera, that's not just the 3 goats. That's any offspring they produce, any genetic material derived from them. You'd have zero claim if they developed this into a multi-million-dollar breeding line. Which they could. Almost certainly would. This isn't a $2 million deal for them. This is a $100 million opportunity. They're buying low from someone they think won't know better. What should I do? That's not my call. $2 million is life-changing money. I can't tell you to turn that down. He paused. But I can tell you what happens to those goats if you sell. I worked at Lux Fiber for 5 years. I saw their breeding programs. Optimal conditions for fiber production means animals spend most of their lives in climate-controlled buildings, handled minimally to reduce stress that might affect fiber quality. They're well-fed and healthy, technically, but they're commodities, not companions. Vera thought about Bramble's trust, so hard-won, about Thistle's playful curiosity, about Clover's maternal gentleness. There's no middle ground, no way to keep them and still benefit from their genetics? There might be, but it would require building something yourself, a business, a breeding program, a market presence. That's risky, expensive, and time-consuming. The safe choice is Diane's offer. And the right choice? I can't answer that for you, Vera. I'm sorry. After they hung up, Vera sat with her mother's photograph, the contract, and her own exhausted conscience. $2 million, freedom, safety, everything she'd lacked for years. Or 3 goats who trusted her, who'd given her purpose when she had none, who represented something more than money, the value in what others discarded, including herself. She had 2 weeks to decide, but already, looking at Diane's contract, Vera knew what her heart wanted. The question was whether she'd be brave enough to follow it. Estelle arrived unannounced the next morning, her truck rumbling into the driveway before dawn. Vera was already in the barn, having barely slept, her mind cycling through impossible choices. Word travels fast on this mountain, Estelle said without preamble, joining Vera at Clover's pen. Heard Lux Fiber paid you a visit? Heard your brother's back too, Jonas. Helen Gardner, actually. She was at the post office when Roy was asking directions to your place yesterday. By evening, half the mountain knew. Estelle leaned against the barn wall, her pragmatic gaze assessing Vera's exhausted face. You look like hell. $2 million, Vera said quietly. That's the offer. Estelle was quiet for a long moment, watching Clover investigate a fresh flake of hay. That's life-changing money. Everyone keeps saying that, because it's true. You could pay off Eleanor's medical debts, fix this place up or buy something better, have security for the first time in years. Your mother would want that for you, would she? Vera turned to face Estelle. Or would she tell me that not everything worth having comes with a price tag? Your mother was pragmatic above all else. She understood survival. Estelle's expression softened. But she also understood that some things, once sold, can't be bought back. The question isn't what the money could buy. It's what you'd be selling to get it. Diane says the goats would be well cared for. State-of-the-art facilities. I'm sure she does. And maybe it's even true by her definition of care. But Vera, those 3 animals trust you in a way they'll never trust strangers in a corporate facility, no matter how expensive it is. Bramble's barely comfortable with me, and I've been here a dozen times. You think she'll thrive being handled by rotating staff in Montana? The truth of it landed like a weight in Vera's chest. She thought of Bramble's skittishness, how any sudden movement could send her into panic. How long had it taken just to earn the privilege of touching her without fear? Marcus says there might be other options. Building something myself, that's a harder road. Risky, expensive, no guarantees. Estelle pulled out her phone, showed Vera a photo. This is my brother's farm in South Korea, 3rd-generation organic operation. 10 years ago, a major agricultural corporation offered him a fortune to sell. Land, business, everything. He said no, built his own cooperative model instead, maintained control. Now he makes less money than he would have, but he owns his work. He sleeps at night, and if I can't build something, if I try and fail, then you fail having tried. That's still better than succeeding at something that destroys what you were trying to save. Estelle headed toward her truck, then turned back. One more thing. Whatever you decide, do it for you. Not for Roy's debts, not for anyone else's expectations. Your mother spent her whole life putting others first. Don't make the same mistake. Marcus called that afternoon, his voice tight with urgency. I've been digging into Lux Fiber's recent acquisitions, he said. I still have friends in the industry. Vera, the pattern is consistent and ugly. They acquire rare genetics promising premium care, extract maximum value through intensive breeding programs, then liquidate the original animals once they've established reproducing bloodlines. Liquidate. Sell to commercial farms sometimes. Euthanize occasionally if the animals have health issues from intensive breeding. The point is, your 3 goats specifically, the ones you rescued, won't have value to them beyond their reproductive capacity. Once that's maximized, they're expendable. Vera felt sick. There's more, Marcus continued. The contract language about genetic rights is even worse than I thought. It includes a non-compete clause, preventing you from working with any cashmere goats for 10 years. You couldn't even start over with different animals. You'd be completely out of the fiber business. Can they do that? With enough money and lawyers, they can do almost anything. And Vera, he paused. I'm coming down tomorrow. I have some ideas about alternative options, but we need to talk in person. Is that okay? Marcus, you don't have to. I want to. Besides, I've been thinking about this all night and I might have found a solution. No promises, but it's worth discussing. He arrived the next morning with a briefcase full of documents and an intensity that filled Vera's small kitchen. They spread papers across the table, business plans, market analyses, cooperative models from New Zealand and Scotland, ethical breeding guidelines. Here's what I'm thinking, Marcus said, sketching a diagram. You maintain ownership and control of the goats. I help you establish an ethical breeding program, slow, sustainable, prioritizing animal welfare. We start small, build relationships with luxury brands that value sustainability. It's a longer path to profitability, but you keep your principles intact. I don't have capital for that. I can barely afford feed, which is where this gets complicated. Marcus ran his hand through his hair, making it stand up in all directions. I have savings from my corporate years. Not millions, but enough to help you get started. I could invest as a minority partner. You'd retain controlling interest and decision-making authority. I'd provide technical expertise and funding in exchange for a percentage of future profits. Vera stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I believe in what this could be. An ethical alternative in an industry dominated by exploitation. Because I'm tired of watching good people get crushed by corporate greed. He met her eyes directly. And because I care about those 3 goats. And about the person who saved them. The admission hung between them. Charged with something neither quite acknowledged. That's a huge risk for you, Vera said quietly. So is your offer from Lux Fiber. At least this way, we both have skin in the game. They spent hours going through possibilities, running numbers, identifying challenges. The picture Marcus painted was daunting. Years of hard work, significant investment, uncertain returns. But it was also hopeful. A path that didn't require sacrificing everything she'd come to value. I need to think about it, Vera said finally. Of course. But Vera, Marcus hesitated. Whatever you decide, I want you to know this isn't just about business for me. I mean, it's a business proposal. But it's also... He stopped, clearly struggling. I haven't felt this excited about work in years. And that's partly the fiber science, but it's also you. How you care for these animals. Your integrity. I just wanted you to know that. After he left, Vera sat on her porch, overwhelmed by the weight of competing futures. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of amber and violet. A vehicle approached, not Marcus returning, but an unfamiliar sedan. A woman emerged, 30s, sharp-eyed, carrying a recorder and notebook. Ms. Blackwood. I'm Sienna Hart, freelance journalist. I cover rural economic stories, and I've been following the luxury fiber industry for a series I'm writing. I'd love to talk to you about your goats and Lux Fiber's interest in them. Vera's exhaustion manifested as frustration. How does everyone know my business? Small industry, smaller communities. Lux Fiber's interest in independent producers is newsworthy, especially given their acquisition history. May I ask, have they made you an offer? Against her better judgment, or maybe because she desperately needed someone who wasn't personally invested to talk to, Vera invited Sienna in. The journalist was direct, professional and unnervingly perceptive. She asked about the goats, the discovery, Marcus's involvement, and Diane's offer. She took notes efficiently, asking follow-up questions that revealed deep knowledge of the textile industry. "You're not the first small producer Luxfiber has approached," Sienna said finally. "I've documented 6 similar cases in the last 3 years. The pattern is consistent. They identify rare genetics, offer significant money, acquire complete control. What happens after varies, but the producers universally report feeling misled about the long-term outcome. Do you have proof? Interviews, contract analyses, documentation of what happened to the animals. Nothing Luxfiber couldn't legally defend, but enough to paint a picture of their practices." Sienna leaned forward. "Here's why I'm talking to you. This story needs a current example to be relevant. Someone willing to go on record about the offer, the pressure, the decision process. You could help expose practices that hurt both animals and the people who care about them. Or I could just take the money and disappear." "You could," Sienna agreed. "And honestly, I wouldn't judge you for that. $2 million is life-changing. But I don't think that's what you're going to do. Why not? Because if it was, you wouldn't look this miserable about it." After Sienna left, with Vera's tentative agreement to keep talking, but no promises, Vera finally went to find Zeke. She needed wisdom that didn't come with investment proposals or journalistic angles. She found him at his cabin, deeper in the mountains, tending his beehives as evening settled in. He looked up as she approached, unsurprised as always. "Figured you'd come eventually," he said. "Heard about the money." "Everyone's heard about the money. Mountain knows its business." He gestured for her to sit on a weathered bench while he finished with the hives. "Your mama used to come here when decisions weighed heavy. Said the bees reminded her that complicated things can still have simple truths." "What's the simple truth here, Zeke?" He sat beside her, quiet for a long moment. "You know the story about the man who sold his mountain spring? You told me that one already. Then you know how it ends. Water dammed up, valley dried out, man rich, but watching everything he loved die of thirst." Zeke pulled out a jar of honey, held it to the fading light. "Here's the part I didn't tell you. Years later, after the company abandoned the dam and the spring was running free again but different, I asked that man if he'd do it again. You know what he said?" "What?" "Said he'd do it different. Would have found a way to share the water, keep it flowing, benefit his people without giving up control. But he couldn't see that option when the money was blinding him." Zeke handed her the honey jar. "The problem wasn't selling or keeping. It was thinking those were his only choices. Marcus offered to help me build something different. A third option, and you're scared it won't work. I'm terrified." "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes." Zeke stood, started walking back toward his cabin. "Your mama was scared too every time she chose you and this mountain over easier paths. But she chose based on what she could live with, not what she could profit from. That's the difference between being rich and being whole." Vera sat alone as night fell, holding honey that glowed gold in the darkness, thinking about choices and consequences and the difference between wealth and wholeness. She had 1 week left to decide, but for the first time since Diane's visit, the path forward felt less like choosing between only 2 options and more like finding the courage to forge a third. The question was whether she trusted herself enough to try. That night, Vera couldn't sleep. She walked to the barn at 2 a.m., found all 3 goats awake and alert as if they'd been waiting for her. She sat in the hay and they gathered close, Clover resting her head on Vera's lap, Bramble settling nearby, Thistle curled against her side. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Everyone has advice. Everyone knows what's best, but none of them have to live with the consequences." In the silence, surrounded by 3 warm bodies that trusted her completely, the answer felt closer. Not clear yet, but approaching like dawn, inevitable, just requiring patience. Her phone buzzed. A text from Roy, 1 week left. "Don't be stupid. This is both our last chance." She deleted it without responding. Another text, this one from Marcus. "No pressure, but I ran more numbers. Sent detailed projections to your email. Whatever you decide, I support it. And finally, Sienna just finished interviewing 3 former Lux Fiber partners. The stories are worse than I thought. Call me when you're ready to talk. Vera turned off her phone. Tomorrow she'd read Marcus's projections. She'd call Sienna and hear those stories. She'd probably hear from Roy again, and maybe even Diane, applying pressure. But tonight, she just sat with her goats and let herself feel what she felt, terrified of making the wrong choice, angry at being forced to choose, grateful for these 3 unlikely creatures who'd made the choice matter at all. Whatever I decide, she told them, it won't be about money. It won't be about what's safe or easy. It'll be about what I can live with when I look at myself in the mirror. Clover made a soft sound of contentment. Bramble's breathing slowed into sleep. Thistle snored softly, completely secure in the moment, and Vera sat in her barn, surrounded by $2 million of genetic potential that she'd saved for 75, and knew that the most valuable thing in this equation couldn't be measured in money at all. The decision was getting clearer, but the hard part, the part that would require every ounce of courage she possessed, was still to come. Sienna arrived 3 days later with a laptop full of evidence and a recorder that captured everything Vera needed to hear. "This is Patricia Chen," Sienna said, playing the first interview. A woman's voice, tired and bitter, filled Vera's kitchen. "Lux Fiber bought my rare Angora rabbits in 2021. Promised premium care, showed me glossy photos of their facilities. I sold for $800,000. 6 months later, I visited unannounced. The rabbits were alive, technically healthy, but kept in individual cages, barely larger than their bodies. Optimal fiber production conditions, they said. No socialization, minimal handling, climate-controlled but sterile. They'd produced 3 generations of offspring. My original rabbits looked broken. That's the only word. Alive but broken." Vera's hands clenched. "They wouldn't let me take them back," Patricia continued. "The contract was ironclad. I'd signed away all rights. I left my rabbits in those cages and took my money, and I haven't slept well since." Sienna played 2 more interviews. The details varied, but the pattern was consistent. Promises of care that meant optimal production conditions, genetic extraction through intensive breeding, original animals reduced to biological machinery. The contracts all contained similar clauses, Sienna explained, pulling up documents on her laptop. "Here's Lux Fiber's standard acquisition agreement. See Section 12, subsection C. Seller relinquishes all future claims to genetic material and derivative products. That means if they develop a $1 billion breeding line from your goats, you receive nothing beyond the initial payment." Diane showed me that clause, said it was standard. It is standard for them. But look at Section 18. Sienna highlighted another passage. "In the event of genetic replication or successful breeding program establishment, original biological material may be reassigned, sold, or humanely disposed of at company's sole discretion." Vera felt sick. Disposed of? Euthanized, usually. Once they've extracted the genetics and established breeding stock, the original animals become redundant and expensive to maintain for sentimental reasons. Sienna's expression was grim. Patricia's rabbits were lucky. They were kept alive for ongoing egg harvesting. But I found 2 cases where original animals were euthanized within 18 months of acquisition. That's legal? With the right contract language and lawyers, yes. The animals are property. When Lux Fiber owns them, they can make any decisions they deem necessary for their business interests. Vera thought of Clover's gentle trust, Bramble's hard-won confidence, Thistle's playful affection. The idea of them in sterile cages, reduced to production units, then disposed of when they were no longer profitable. "I can't," she said. "I can't do that to them." "Then don't," Sienna said simply. "But Vera, you need to understand what you're turning down. $2 million is generational wealth. It could transform your entire life. I'm not here to tell you what to decide. I'm here to make sure you understand what you're deciding between. What happened to the people who said no to Lux Fiber?" Sienna's expression shifted. "That's where it gets complicated. Lux Fiber doesn't like rejection. They've been known to monitor competitors, offer incentives to suppliers to refuse service, even fund legal challenges to small operations permits and licenses. They don't destroy people overtly, but they make independent operation difficult. Marcus warned me about that. Marcus left Lux Fiber because he tried to expose some of these practices internally. They made sure he couldn't work in corporate textile research again. He's been consulting independently, but he's essentially blacklisted from major industry positions. Sienna leaned forward. I'm telling you this because you need to know. Choosing the harder path has real consequences. Lux Fiber has resources and reach you can't match. After Sienna left, Vera called Marcus. Did you know Sienna was investigating Lux Fiber? I suspected. She contacted me months ago about my time there. I didn't mention it because I didn't want to influence your decision with my own baggage. Your baggage is relevant, Marcus. You were blacklisted for standing up to them. Silence. Then yes, and I'd do it again. But that's my choice, Vera. You have to make yours based on what you can live with, not what I already sacrificed. If I say no to Diane, if we try to build something independent, they'll come after us. Probably. Not violently, nothing illegal. But they'll make it harder than it needs to be. He paused. Is that enough reason to give them what they want? Vera looked out at the barn, where 3 goats were visible in the late afternoon sun, completely unaware of the forces converging around them. No, she said. It's not. Then we fight together. But Vera, I need you to be sure, because once you say no to Diane, there's no going back. She won't make the offer again. I'm sure. Okay. She could hear the smile in Marcus's voice. Then let's build something worth fighting for. That evening, Roy appeared again. This time he didn't knock, just walked into her house like he had rights there. 1 week, Vera. You have 1 week left to make the right decision. Get out. I talked to Diane Mercer. Nice woman. Very understanding about family dynamics. She said if you're worried about being taken advantage of, she'd be happy to adjust the terms. Maybe increase the offer to 2.5 million, Vera stood. You talked to Diane? About my business? Our business. We're family, and families discuss major financial decisions together. We're not family. You abandoned that right years ago. Roy's mask slipped completely, showing the desperate, angry man beneath. You self-righteous bitch. You act like you're so noble, but you're just scared. Scared to have money, scared to have a life, scared to be anything except the martyr who sacrificed for Mommy. At least I was there, Vera shot back. At least I showed up. I'm here now. Showing up, asking for help. And you'd rather throw away millions on 3 goats than help your own brother. Your problems aren't my responsibility. The money I owe, these people don't make empty threats, Vera. They will hurt me. And you could prevent that with 1 signature, but you won't because you care more about animals than your own blood. You're using Mom's memory to manipulate me. You're selling information about my situation to the corporation trying to exploit me. You haven't asked how I am, what I need, what this has been like for me. Everything is about you, your debts, your problems, your needs. That's not family, Roy. That's parasitism. Roy stepped closer, and for a moment, Vera saw something dangerous in his eyes. You're going to regret this. When those people come for me, when I end up in a hospital or worse, that'll be on you. You could have saved me. You could have saved yourself. At any point in the last 4 years, you could have made better choices. This isn't my fault, and it's not my problem. The sound of a truck in the driveway interrupted them. Estelle's white pickup. Behind her, Marcus's Prius. Roy's expression shifted to cornered animal. This isn't over, he said, pushing past Vera toward the door. He nearly collided with Estelle on the porch. Problem here? Estelle asked, her tone carrying the weight of someone who dealt with difficult men for 30 years. Just leaving, Roy muttered, retreating to his rental car. But as he drove away, he paused at the end of the driveway, window down. You'll regret choosing them over me, he called back. I'll make sure of it. Then he was gone, dust settling in his wake. What was that about? Marcus asked, joining them on the porch. My brother trying to manipulate me into taking Diane's offer so he can get money for his gambling debts. Estelle snorted. Family's complicated. But that man's not your responsibility, Vera. I know. Doesn't make it easier. They went inside, and Marcus spread new documents across the kitchen table. Business plans he'd refined, market analyses, financial projections for an ethical cooperative model. I've been reaching out to contacts, he said. There are luxury brands actively seeking ethical alternatives to standard luxury fibers. Sustainability is becoming a market differentiator, not just a nice-to-have. If we can demonstrate genuine animal welfare standards, transparent practices, and maintain the fiber quality, we could build something sustainable. How long before it's profitable? Honestly, 3 to 5 years to establish steady income. 7 to 10 to match what Diane's offering, if everything goes well. He met her eyes. It's not a sure thing, Vera, it's a risk. But it's a risk where you maintain control and integrity. Estelle had been quiet, listening. Now she spoke up. What about community involvement? You're talking about expanding production. That means more land, more animals, more labor. Jonas Pritchard's facing foreclosure. The Henderson farm just went under. This mountain's dying economically. What if this could be bigger than just you? Marcus's eyes widened. A cooperative model. Multiple farms, shared resources, collective marketing. That could actually work. It would take coordination, trust, shared standards. Mountain folks are good at those things when there's reason to be, Estelle said. Might not trust outsiders, but they'll trust Vera if she's leading it. She's one of them, even if they forgot that for a while. The idea bloomed in Vera's mind, not just saving her 3 goats and building a small business, but creating something that could help her whole community, using what had been discarded to lift up other discarded things. That's ambitious, she said. So is turning down $2 million, Estelle pointed out. Might as well be ambitious in the direction that helps people. They talked late into the evening, sketching possibilities. Marcus would provide technical expertise and initial funding. Vera would maintain controlling interest and final decision-making authority. Other farms could join as members, following strict animal welfare protocols in exchange for market access and shared resources. It was risky, complicated, and would require years of hard work with no guaranteed success. It was also exactly what Vera wanted to build. I'm saying no to Diane, she announced. Tomorrow I'm calling her and declining the offer. Then we start building this instead, Marcus grinned. Then let's build something worth saying no for. After they left, Vera sat alone with her decision. She felt lighter than she had in weeks, terrified still but certain. The path forward was harder, but it was hers, built on her terms, according to her values, with people she trusted. She walked to the barn one more time, where 3 goats greeted her with their usual enthusiasm. You 3 have caused quite the revolution, she told them. We're about to make some very powerful people very unhappy. But you know what? You're worth it. Clover pressed her head against Vera's chest. Bramble watched with soft eyes, and Thistle tried to eat her jacket zipper. Tomorrow, she'd burn the bridge to easy money and walk into uncertain future. But tonight, she'd sleep better than she had since Diane's offer, because some things, trust, integrity, the bond between rescuer and rescued, couldn't be bought or sold at any price, not even $2 million. Vera stood in her expanded barn, new construction funded by a combination of Marcus's investment, a community development grant, and pre-orders from luxury brands committed to sustainable sourcing. 15 goats now, all descended from Clover's first breeding. The original 3 had their own dedicated pasture, retired from intensive production, living out their days as the foundation stock they'd always been meant to be. Clover's 2 kids, Luna and Star, had inherited her gentle temperament and exceptional fiber quality. Bramble, who'd finally allowed herself to be bred, had produced a daughter as skittish as herself, but producing fiber that tested at an astonishing 11.5 microns. Even Thistle, still mischievous, had matured into a patient mother. Morning inspection? Marcus appeared at the barn entrance, coffee in hand. He'd relocated permanently 6 months ago, his consulting work now focused entirely on the cooperative. His hair was as messy as ever, but his eyes held a contentment Vera recognized. the look of someone who'd found their purpose. Just checking on everyone before the visitors arrive. Today, Jonas Pritchard and 3 other local farmers were coming for orientation. The cooperative had grown to include 5 member farms, each following strict animal welfare protocols that Marcus had developed and Estelle had vetted. It was slower than corporate production, less profitable per animal, but sustainable in ways that mattered beyond quarterly earnings. Nervous? Marcus asked, joining her. Always. But the good kind of nervous. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sienna. Her article about Lux Fiber's acquisition practices had won a regional journalism award and sparked industry-wide scrutiny. 2 luxury brands had publicly severed ties with Lux Fiber, citing ethical concerns. Diane Mercer's company was facing lawsuits from 3 former partners whose contracts had been exposed as exploitative. Vera hadn't heard from Roy in over a year. The last she'd known through Aunt Claire, he'd declared bankruptcy and moved west. She felt sadness about it, but not guilt. His choices had been his own. Jonas arrived first, his truck pulling up exactly on time. The proud farmer who'd mocked her at the auction, now approached with humility earned through near loss of his family's land. "Miss Blackwood," he said formally. "Ready to learn from the woman who knew better than me," Vera smiled. "Just Vera, and we're all learning together." The orientation took hours. Marcus explained fiber testing and quality standards. Estelle covered health protocols. Vera talked about what the cooperative meant. Not just economically, but philosophically, building something that valued animals and people equally, that measured success in sustainability rather than extraction. Later, as the farmers left with heads full of information and hope for their struggling operations, Marcus found Vera at Clover's pasture. The old goat approached the fence, pressed her head against Vera's hand. Bramble watched from a comfortable distance, still wary, always would be, but safe. Thistle was attempting to convince a visiting farmer's child to share their snack. "You know what Diane's offer is worth now, adjusted for market growth?" Marcus asked. "I don't want to know." "About $2.8 million. What we've built is valued at roughly $400,000, and most of that is debt we're still servicing." "Are you trying to make me regret my choice?" "No." He moved closer, and Vera felt the familiar warmth of his presence, comfortable now after months of working side by side. "I'm reminding you that you chose something worth more than money, community, integrity, a future built on your terms." Vera looked at her expanded operation, her cooperative partners, the 3 goats who'd started everything. She thought about her mother who'd worked herself to death with nothing to show for it except a daughter who'd learned that worth wasn't measured in dollars. "You know what the best part is?" she said. "I sleep at night. Every choice I've made, every risk I've taken, I can live with it all. That's worth more than any amount Diane could have offered. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Marcus took her hand, a gesture that had become natural over months of partnership, evolving into something more. "Then we keep building." Vera squeezed his hand, watching Clover lead her offspring to fresh pasture, watching Bramble finally relax in the afternoon sun, watching Thistle live up to her troublemaker reputation. 3 worthless goats had made her richer than she'd ever imagined, not in the way the world measured wealth, but in the way her mother would have understood. In purpose reclaimed, community rebuilt, and the fierce satisfaction of knowing she'd chosen the harder right over the easier wrong. "Yeah," she said, smiling. "We keep building, and in the barn behind them, in pastures spreading across cooperating farms throughout the mountain valley. The future they were building together continued to grow, one carefully tended animal, one ethical choice, one small act of resistance against a world that measured value only in profit. Some things, it turned out, were truly priceless. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.